welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we are going to get a little bit controversial, and we're going to talk about Stallman-Gate and cancel culture. Cancel everything, because that's what some people would have us do. Of course, this comes at the gate of the Free Software Foundation has not been doing particularly well since Stallman left a few years ago. And now that he is coming back on as a board member, a whole lot of people got their panties in a knot and are demanding the removal of Stallman, or the removal of the Free Software Foundation, or the removal of absolutely everything possibly connected to anything that seems possibly offensive to anybody, as anybody interprets it inside of their own crazy head. That is insane. And I just wanted to look at a couple of different examples. Now, DistroTube just recently did an amazing video on this as well, and I forgot to get the name of it. Just head on over to DistroTube's channel. You'll see it in his recent videos this week. And he did a great analysis actually looking at the actual signatures on this open letter, looking at how the statements inside of the letter itself violate the code of conduct for the GNOME Foundation, and therefore everybody on the GNOME Foundation should be removed from the GNOME Foundation because they're not even following their own code of conduct. Which is why I'm not particularly interested in the codes of conduct, as they focus on how they're being written by some of these individual activists. And because it's not that we want to encourage places where bad things happen. In fact, we shouldn't be. Common sense says we shouldn't. Practical decency says that we shouldn't. But when your code of conduct is explicitly written to bring on people because of individual traits that they have, rather than their competency at doing the job you need them to do, you are going to result in more horrible software, more horrible hardware, more horrible products. This is why a meritocracy works, because it's based on who does the job better. Justice in America is supposed to be blindfolded. The pictures of justice is a blindfolded person with blindfolded Lady Liberty with the scales in her hand to indicate we're just going to look at the facts. We're not going to look at all of these other factors. But that has been perverted in recent years by people who want to cancel everybody and everything that is not consistently, perfectly aligning with their own ever-shifting mindsets. And so what happens here is we get a case where a foundation starts to flounder when they get rid of a controversial figure, and we'll get into the controversial things that he said. And we'll look at the actual, the notes, what led to all of this to begin with. But the organization started to flounder. They weren't really doing well, so they bring the guy back, and now everybody's like, oh my God, get them out of here. They need to leave. So, of course, Red Hat announced that they are leaving the Free Software Foundation because Stallman is back on the Free Software Foundation board. They had a blog post a couple days back, Kate Walsh, who is on the Free Software Foundation, I think board or something. She's leaving with a statement. There's all these. This is about the GNOME Foundation one. 2,000 signatures telling the Free Software Foundation to cancel this guy, cancel this guy, cancel this guy. And I have a fundamental question. Did Richard Stallman break a law? If Richard Stallman has broken a law, then arrest him and remove him from the board for violating the law. But if he says things that are simply distasteful or that you don't like, so what? Okay, here's an analysis, and I'm going to try and utilize this story without giving away enough details or facts, but just kind of by way of proxy here. If you like somebody, you tend to overlook the little peccadillos that they do that are kind of distasteful. If you don't like somebody, you tend to amplify every little thing that they do that you do not like, and then you utilize that as more reasons to hate this person. And this is the type of thing that I see, and I saw it recently. I have a fairly controversial book, and a person who was looking at it, bouncing between two people, and the person's they wanted to take my side, but having never read the other book that I was opposing, I said, no, you need to stop and read all of the books and weigh your facts. Don't look at whether you like me or don't like me for what is the truth about what's going on. Don't gravitate towards an individual person because you like them better than somebody else or agree better than somebody else. You have to look at all sides of the table, because we tend to side with people we like. We tend to not side with people we don't like, and that is called prejudice. That is something that we tend to have. So there was a fabulous article on Tech Rights about this, pursuing justice and freedom, written yesterday as I'm recording this video, 3/28, by Alexander Olivia. And I think that this bears probably even reading the whole thing. And there is a note down here: permission is granted to make and distribute verbatim copies of the entire document without royalty. Okay, so this is from Tech Rights, so techrights.org. And this one here is a very interesting thing. They start out by saying a lie repeated 1,000 times does not, by virtue of repetition, become the truth. I have always heard that phrase. Another way, 1 million people who say a stupid thing, it's still a stupid thing. Okay? Same general principle. Thousands of people sign an open letter proclaims a human being guilty based on twisted pseudo-evidence, says more about their respect for due process, fair trials, justice, and science than about the human being they seek to burn at the stake. Do they even know who Galileo or Bruno were? I can say I don't know who Bruno is. Galileo, I know. This is the guy who he developed a telescope. He demonstrated by mathematical certainty that indeed the Earth is not the center of the universe. And he demonstrated and he had created a tool to demonstrate this. And he shows this to the priests, and they burn him at the stake. Or kill him with, however means was to execute him at the day. He might have been in the era of, here, drink this poison tea to get out of our face. And that is really what happened. It was a complete denial of science. Burning witches after a kangaroo court-style mob trial does not signal virtue, but rather lack thereof. I love this article. Richard Stallman may be hard to like and work with. His extreme attention to detail and language can be infuriating. He urges to get back to work for free software, picking up and directing his attention to a screen at a dinner table long before that became fashionable, and has often been labeled as disrespectful. His harshness and often tactless disregard for even social conventions can be emotionally hard to swallow and forgive, even with a rational understanding of his condition. But these are not horrifying allegations that would serve the purpose of misleading decent people. Note, misleading decent people. That is what's at the stake here. Misleading decent people into the moral panic that leads to witch burning. The allegations make such leaps from evidence of untargeted harshness, the conclusions of sexism, from cautioning against accusation inflammation, and from misguiding and corrected iniquities about teen sexuality to pedophilia and defensive thereof, from proposing an alternative to a grammar quirk to transphobia, from passing on scientific advice about fetuses with life-impairing conditions. What is the criticism that genocide, standing for informed choice, or insensitivity of science? I can tell you, let me stop right there for a moment. For those of you who may not know, I actually am a scientist. I am a doctoral level scientist. I did my studies in peroxisome proliferator activated receptors, their interplay with the foxhead proteins. We worked in an aerial hydrocarbon lab. I spent 6 years tracking down metabolic pathways and things like that. I am very well trained in science, and sometimes the fact is there are scientific principles that can hurt our own presuppositions. One of the greatest examples of this, and one of the greatest scientists I've seen in the field of nutrition, I think his name was David Diamond, something like that, and he is a Stanford dietitian. He did the A to Z diet study. You can find this probably 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago at this point in time, maybe. And in the A to Z diet study, and it was called A to Z because it covered the 4 main fad diets. You had the Atkins diet, you had the Zone diet, the Ornish diet, and I forget forget what the other one is called. But it represented the 4 primary diets you go and you see. Paleo, I don't think it was paleo, but I haven't looked at the study for a while. Now, you have to understand that he looked at what science says is the biohealth markers that define a healthy person as defined by science. And he went down and did all of these studies and all of these diets, and he came to the absolute conclusion at the end of his research, thousands of people in his studies, fully lawfully conducted human trials, all sorts of things. He came out and said the Atkins diet is absolutely the best of these 4 diets we looked at for increasing or returning a body to the healthy state. What's the problem with that? He's a vegetarian. If you know anything about the Atkins diet, it is clearly not vegetarian. It is very meat heavy. He is a good scientist because the science was insensitive to his own proclivities. But he was a good scientist. He recognized that and he reported the real facts. That's an important thing to remember, is that when you come down and say a male is defined as somebody who has an X and a Y chromosome, that is an insensitive fact. Sorry, that's reality. You want to be all about science? Y'all are the groups that wanted to exile God from this conversation and say science is it. Now that science disagrees with your point of view, you want to get mad about it. Stop it. You cannot tell me we've got to focus on the science and then deny the science when it disagrees with your own subjective opinions. Period. You want to talk science? Let's talk science. Let's go ahead and move on. A couple of decades ago, he used to make women uncomfortable by staring at them. But after being advised by his friends, he made the effort and managed to overcome the habit. It's not that this effort would be meritorious itself. Those specific circumstances may make it so. But the acknowledgement that he made the effort and succeeded ought to cast significant doubt on the allegations of misogyny. Some of the people who support his cancellation dare claim they are in favor of free software ideas, and that this somehow justifies demanding the collective beheading of the organization he founded to promote those very ideas. The GNU operating system, whose development he started, has led for over 36 years, a system that has won despite those who've long tried to write out its legacy of history. The stubborn, loyal, inflexible, uncorruptible, and dehumanized human being who has consistently and correctly identified threats to software freedom before anyone else has, who has consistently attracted enormous audiences from his speeches and readership to his writings about the software freedom, who have invented copyleft and implemented it into the GNU GPL, the strongest vaccine we've ever had against attackers who label it as a virus or a cancer to discourage developers from adopting it. This is what these self-identified free software supporters are trying to deprive free software movement of by dragging it all to the fire over the shocking but false allegations and over some very real and painful discomfort and disagreement. Their false allegations have done far more to divide the movement, alienate people, and empower our historical opponents than Stallman possibly could, even if he's devoted his entire life to it. Our opponents must be thrilled. Even if there were any truth to any of these outrageous allegations, it would be self-defeating for the movement to force him into non-existence. When irreconcilable differences impose themselves on all of us who support the movement would likely agree that having more collectives committed to the same principles and cooperating to promote the same ideas is preferable over weakening and dividing the movement with a schism or with indefinite infighting. However, decapitating organizations and projects he founded and leads on the grounds that he's there, even if the goal is not a hostile takeover, comes across as vindictive, petty, and destructive. It's very hard to see good intentions behind it. Anyone with a comparable track record to his intrigue and uncompromisingly pursuing and advancing the cause of software freedom is very welcome to apply for any of his positions in the movement other than founding father, of course, and he'll surely be glad to make the room. Very thick skin is now a strict requirement. We are inclusive. A select primary based on the alignment with the core values of the movement, but all else being equal, we would give preference to the candidates who display these rare features in complete flawless package. Yeah, none of us are flawless. And this picture here is Malcolm X, of course. If you are not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. So with that, I wanted to say this. If Stallman has actually committed a crime, then arrest him, try him, and send him to jail and remove him on the basis that he has committed a crime. If he has simply said something that is distasteful to you, then go ahead and fume yourself out. But trying to activate people who are being kept ignorant about it is a little bit distasteful. What did he actually say? Well, this was actually the entire 20-page newsletter that was released by Motherboard or Vice. I don't know, whatever one this happens to be. And this is the page. This is on page 16 at the bottom of this, which is where the question comes into play. So it starts in here, September 11th, 2019 is where we get the discussion. Announcement of the Friday event does an injustice to Marvin Minsky, a deceased AI pioneer, Marvin Minsky, who is accused of assaulting one of Epstein's victims. The injustice is in the word assaulting. The term sexual assault is so vague and slippery that it facilitates accusation inflammation, taking claims that somebody did X, leading to people think of it as Y, which is much worse than X. The accusation quoted is a clear example of inflation. The reference reports the claim that Minsky had sex with one of Epstein's harem, and there is a link to a Verge article on that. Let's presume that was true, parentheses, and I see no reason to believe it. The word assaulting presumes that he applied force or violence in some unspecified way, but the article itself says no such things. It only says they had sex. We can imagine many scenarios, but the most plausible scenario, now we're going to read this paragraph. I'm going to have to go back and explain it from the perspective of psychology. Hey, we can imagine many scenarios, but the most plausible scenario is that she presented herself to him as entirely willing. Assuming she was being coerced by Epstein, he would have had every reason to tell her to conceal that from most of his associates. Okay, so this is a person who has been heavily groomed, who has been trafficked, who has been, their entire existence is to keep this flaw going. This is reprehensible. The person behind this, aka Epstein, absolutely should be held accountable. Unfortunately, he died. He didn't commit suicide, no. But the fact of the matter is, he is the one that did this. Now, what about the people here? He is kind of defending this one person that he knew. That's what's going on. But what he says is that this guy may not have known her exact age. This guy may not have done anything that was forceful or bad. This person was just, quote unquote, maybe serviced by somebody that he assumed was of age and assumed was happy about it. Now, this is where I, as a Christian, is going to stand up and say, okay, number one, let's stop having fornication or adultery. Number two, let's stand on some objective truths about morality. And all of these problems just disappear. I am in no way in support of this crap. But I can see this scenario happening a mile away. Because I have been abused in ways. It's happened. I understand the power of a coercive person who can destroy you. And I also understand the dangers and the challenge it takes to walk away from that nonsense. And here is a person simply saying, you know what? This guy didn't go over there and forcibly rape some lady. He just didn't know that she was groomed. That's all he's saying. Let's just question this even more. Now, is this probably optically bad? Probably. is this cancelable bad, kill this guy, get him out of here, destroy his life legacy, and everybody distance from everything the guy ever touches. No, that is witch burning. That is witch burning, but this is exactly what he said. So let me just conclude his statement here. I've concluded from various examples of accusation, inflation, that it is absolutely wrong to use the term sexual assault as in an accusation. Whatever conduct you want to criticize, you should describe it with a specific term that avoids moral vagueness about the nature of criticism. Now, I happen to know that there's some people that are jumping down all over and saying he's a pedo or he's a pedo sympathizer. I have some other very sad news from you guys that I can say this as well from, again, being a Christian and agreeing in an objective morality and objective moral truth and adherence to certain rules and conducts that I will take on my life, like not being alone with a lady and not engaging in some sexual act on somebody's strange guy's island. Okay? This is the fact of the matter is, I also hold these objective truths. The very thing that the pedo community is doing right now is the same thing that the homosexual lobby did 30 years ago. Homosexuality is now legal in the law of the land. What's going to happen in another 30 years? Are any of you guys aware that in the state of California, within the last 3 to 6 months, it is now perfectly legal for a 24-year-old to sodomize a 14-year-old boy. I think it's a 15-year-old boy. These are the things that are happening in our land right now. You say, oh, he's a pedo. I don't see everybody calling for, I guess there are some people calling for Gavin Newsom, who signed that into law, to be removed, but it's not on basis of that. It's on basis of other things. Okay. Let's talk about this. Looking at who's over on here on this island, I don't see this mass group of people calling for the arrest and imprisonment of Bill Clinton. He was on that plane and on that island more than anybody. And there are a lot of photographs supposing the things that he may have done. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. The fact of the matter is, these are people that just don't like Stallman. And as I said earlier, they don't like him, so they use everything they can against him to try and ban him from all society without charges, without a trial, without anything. Just court of public opinion, crucify this guy, and then do away with anything and everything he comes near, and then pressure all of them to conform to your own irrationality, your own hate mob. As I said on my Christian channel many times, how many of the people at the beginning of Passion Week announced Hosanna to the highest as Jesus walks on into Jerusalem, shouted crucify him at the end of the week when the Pharisees had riled up the crowd? And that's exactly what is going on. I'm not a fan of Stallman. I don't really care for the guy. I think he's a little kooky and a little bit extreme, but until the man actually commits a crime and is found guilty before a jury of his peers, let's let him do his job. Let's let him do his work. There's my thoughts on the matter, and it seems fairly rational to my mind. So let me know how wrong I am in the comments down below, and we can go ahead and have the discussion down there as long as you are respectful. If you're not respectful, I will probably delete your comments. But that's the fact of the matter is, we have this cancel culture going on yet again, and it's at the hands of people. By the way, look at that DistroTube video again. The people leading the charge here, they're not free software people. They're activists. And they're not activists for software. They're activists for social justice. They would have you hire people because of the color of their hair or who they choose to sleep with at night, rather than their ability to actually accomplish the task. To me, that seems irrational. That's my thoughts on the matter. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.